Content warnings for this video include child abuse, so if that's going to trigger you or make you at all uncomfortable, please prioritize your own mental health and click off the video now. Thank you.
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty.
Ruby Frankie, mother of the now defunct 8 Passengers YouTube channel, was arrested with her business partner Jody Hildebrandt on August 30th under the charges of aggravated child abuse after Ruby's 12-year-old son had climbed through a window to escape Jody's home. He had run to a neighbor's house for help, asking for food, water, and for that neighbor to call the police. This child was emaciated with wounds and duct tape on his limbs. The news of this shocked the generalized public who did not actively watch Ruby's old channel or the newer Connections videos, but many people on YouTube who had been criticizing Ruby and Jody for their years' worth of questionable content were less surprised that they had been caught abusing children. But the recent release of the details pertaining to what kind of abuse that these children suffered from when they were off camera has proved to be even more horrific than what anybody could have originally thought. Hey there, I'm here to interrupt your regularly scheduled entertainment. If this is the first time you are either watching my channel, hearing about this case, or if you just are kind of vaguely familiar with the case but not like the general details, please go check out my first video pertaining to all of this. It's an hour-long recap of sorts detailing like what had been going on from this case from the time of their arrest up until about the end of September, as many details were coming up pretty consistently until then. As the title might suggest, in this video I'm going to go over some of the new information in regards to the case, including things dealing with Kevin, who is still a free man as of the time of writing the script. Shortly after their arrest, not a whole lot of new information was coming out about Ruby and Jody specifically, since their court dates had been pushed back due to the overwhelming amount of evidence that was being continually sent into their legal teams involving the case. Additionally, since they are both pretty infamous online for being horrific people, a lot of people are reaching out and trying to find out more information about what had been going on with them while they were being imprisoned. I believe this is at least in part why records and other information about them had been denied to the public by the judge. While having a lot of information is good for the public who are like curious about the case and want to see people brought to justice for their wrongdoings, it's also a negative to have that much information available to the general public, since it would make it harder for a jury trial if things came to that point. In order for a jury to remain impartial to a case, they have to know like as little to nothing about the case as possible in order to serve on that jury, and the more information regarding a case is like spread around, the harder it is to find uninformed people to serve. The longer it takes to find a jury, the longer it takes for the people accused of a crime to be punished adequately, or for an innocent person to be set free. Since Ruby and Jody's arrest, many people have come forward to speak out against both of them. In my last video, I covered statements from one of Jody's previous clients, Adam, and her nibbling Jesse, and the abuse they both had suffered due to Jody either influencing people around them to do things to them or physically inflicting the abuse herself. One of Ruby's cousins had also been interviewed by a news outlet in order to confide that the abuse that they heard about was things that actually kind of ran within Ruby's family, and that Ruby wasn't the only one to abuse her kids in that manner. At the time of this interview, we were unaware of the physical extent of the abuse, and mostly we're just relying on information of the Ruby children being starved as punishment. Since my last video, Ruby's sisters have also come out to speak out in regards to her arrest. These sisters, whom are also family vloggers, go figure, were met with pretty heavy backlash due to their statements, especially when at least one of these sisters had mentioned that they were aware of the abuse and insisted they did all they could to help the Frankie children. Obviously, people didn't think that they did enough to help, especially when they mentioned things like not feeling right continuing to make content for their pages before addressing everything, as if their content really fucking mattered in any of this. It really gave off a sense to some people that they may have been more concerned with their public image in terms of their YouTube channels, as opposed to being concerned for the kids that they had apparently knew were being abused. The knowledge that they said they were aware of the abuse is even more shocking, with the details now released regarding exactly what Ruby and Jody were doing to at least 2 of these 6 children. When the sisters admitted to knowing about the abuse, were they saying that in regards to just knowing about the starvation, or did they know, like, everything else? It's honestly sad either way you think about it. Also, when it comes to them saying that they did what they could in regards to trying to help the kids, like, how exactly did they try to help? Did they try to offer a comfort to those kids, maybe a safer place to go when they were in trouble? And what I mean by safer is that their own parenting methods displayed on their YouTube channels have been under scrutiny after statements came out, particularly the fact that at least one of these sisters uses something called blanket training, which can have pretty negative psychological impacts on a child. Did any of the sisters report Ruby to Child Protective Services by chance? We know that many calls had been made to CPS over the years on the Frankie family and nothing had been done, but I think the question still stands for me. Did they call to report the abuse that they apparently knew was happening and CPS did nothing from their calls? Or did they try to keep it in the family, as a lot of more cult-like minded people tend to do? It's not uncommon for some people to think that blood relative families are more important than like literally anything, and as a result are trained to avoid contacting law enforcement when someone within that family does something wrong. These family cults, if that's the right thing to call them, will instead try to enact the punishment on that family member themselves. Since usually these people aren't trained professionals in any capacity, it just leads to the offender knowing that even if they do something extremely wrong, they have willing accomplices to cover up their crimes, and vulnerable victims to abuse and exploit, since most of the punishments they get will be a pretty disappointed talking to. Now, I'm not accusing Ruby's extended family of being like this, since I don't know them at all, besides like those response videos and like a couple of critical videos, but hearing them state that they knew even a little bit about the abuse those kids went through triggered me, since this keep it in the family cult doctrine was my life for 18 years. It's a horrible experience to be abused and then have your own family cover up that abuse. My heart deeply aches for the Ruby children. In addition to Ruby's sisters, Kevin's nephew also spoke out about the ongoing situation involving his family, insisting that Kevin should also be arrested. This sentiment is also shared by everyone who's previously been following along with the Frankie family and what they were doing when they were still using the 8 Passengers YouTube page. Kevin's abuse was also recorded and posted for the world to see and judge, much as Ruby's was. As a reminder, Kevin's lawyer, when asked about Kevin and his like role and everything, is very insistent that Kevin never physically abused his children, repeatedly emphasizing the physical aspect of the denial. This is very telling, especially to me, since it would be more damning for him to deny all claims of abuse, since there is recorded instances of Kevin being emotionally abusive towards his children at the very least, and complacent in Ruby's abuse as well. Kevin's innocence, or lack thereof, is further pulled into question when he tried to press charges against his eldest child for burglary. After the 4 minor children had been taken into custody following Ruby and Jody's arrest, Sherry, the oldest Frankie child, had been awarded temporary custody of at least 2 of her siblings. And since she had temporary custody of some of her siblings, she was escorted to her family's home in order to retrieve belongings for them. Later, Kevin returned to the house for the first time in over a year and saw that the door had been damaged. Apparently, unknown to him, this damage was due to the police busting the door open in order to serve a search warrant, searching for the remaining children. After seeing this damage, he called to report a robbery as he noticed things were missing from the house. How he knew these things were recently missing due to the fact that he had already been gone from the house for over a year? Who knows? When he was told that the things that were missing had actually been taken by his daughter, he wanted to press charges against her for burglary. The police did not press charges against Sherry for taking those things from the house, as she'd been granted permission to enter the home and take the things for her siblings. They explained this to Kevin and even retrieved the things that he was really upset over, and even returned them to him. But this did not deter him in insisting on pressing charges and even threatening to sue the police department as a whole.
There you go. Is it all there?
Yes. Yeah, explain to me again why this was not robbery.
Because it's a civil issue. It's you guys are family. She's been in the house before. You haven't been in the house in a year. She had interest in the items. She didn't take them with the intention to deprive you of them. So theft, that's the theft code. We have to prove intent to deprive you of the items. And that wasn't her intent in having them. So the detective sergeant said that we're not going to charge her for anything.
Okay. I'll have to do some more research on that.
You're welcome to do that. If you want to follow up with our detective, you can do so.
Okay.
Yeah, he'll be here on Tuesday. His name's Sergeant McCoy. Okay. You're welcome. Take care.
The items in question that he was making such a fuss about were a variety of like journals and books and electronics. Specifically, he cites a laptop that contained an electronic journal that he knew that Sherry had due to some comments that she had apparently made in court. Which begs the question, what exactly was in that journal that had him so upset that he wanted to press charges against his own daughter? What was so damning that it led him to rush back to the house after not being there in over a year? Unless Sherry made a copy of that journal, we might not know at this point, as it would be completely plausible for Kevin to have deleted it from his computer. We all can have our thoughts and opinions and speculation about what had been on that computer, but we can only make assumptions unless something happens that brings those journals to light. Since the arrest of his wife, Kevin has also filed for divorce against him. While this could be due to a genuine desire to split from her due to, like, her abusive actions, I personally have my doubts. This is where I have some opinions and input due to having dealt with family court situations in the past, since my family is a fucking mess. But I don't think that Kevin is getting a divorce because he actually genuinely wants one, due to his lawyer having previously stated in interviews that Kevin had been like waiting on bated breath for Ruby to tell him that it was okay to go back home. I believe that Kevin filing for divorce is entirely to do with him attempting to get custody of his children. A judge is not going to award custody to someone whom they think is going to continue to endanger the kids. While it is extremely common for kids to go to family members before being sent into foster care, they are also more likely to go to family members who can vouch that they don't frequently go around the previous caregivers of those children, at least in terms of abuse cases in my experience. They'll want to make sure that the children aren't immediately just given back to the person who was abusing them, which is why I think someone, presumably his lawyer, advised him to get a divorce against Ruby so it would appear that he was more committed to his children's safety. Allegedly, in my opinion. Again, I don't know the dude, so I can't say for sure, but I am still under the belief that Kevin needs to be drastically investigated. Another bit of information that we learned throughout this entire mess was the inclusion of someone named Pam Botchner. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. But this person was listed as a president of the Connexions Foundation. When the police were searching for the remaining two Frankie children, they were found in the care of this woman. It's unknown how much involvement she had in the abuse of these kids, as the kids were pretty swiftly taken from her custody. When Ruby had learned of her son's escape from Jody's house, she had called Pam and told her to pick up the other two children. Ruby had claimed that she was having just a family emergency instead of informing Pam of like what was really happening, which is why it's a bit unknown if she was like aware of the abuse or not. I don't know if Ruby had asked Pam to just pick up the kids so they wouldn't end up home alone after she'd been arrested, or if this was Ruby's method of trying to hide the kids from the police. This might be plausible since it was cited from KUTV that the reason they found the children all together was through a surveillance video showing one of the kids being picked up from their job by Pam. Luckily, they were able to track down who Pam was and where she'd taken the children. At this time, it appears that Pam is not in any trouble from the police from having the kids.
So just to make sure I'm understanding all this correctly, Ruby contacted you around noon and said that they had an
around, I don't know if that's
Sure.
exact.
That's
Yeah.
your best guess.
Said she had a family emergency.
And needed you to pick up the girls.
Yeah, she said, would you mind watching the girls while I'm gone? Because she was leaving. I said, yeah, I could do that because I need some help cleaning.
Faced with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse, Ruby pled guilty to 4 of those 6 charges on December 18th in accordance to a plea deal that she had struck with the court.
Ms. Frankie, how do you plead to count 1, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 3, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
To count 5, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
Guilty.
And to count 6, aggravated child abuse, a second-degree felony?
With my deepest regret and sorrow for my family and my children, guilty.
This plea agreement she made with the court included detailed accounts of the torture that she put 2 of her 6 children through. Details included things like forced physical labor, standing out in the desert sun until their skin blistered from sunburns, starving them, hog-tying them with metal handcuffs, and even attempted drowning and suffocation. Personally, without this plea deal, I'm sure that the courts would have probably tried to upgrade the charges against her to attempted murder when these details would have come to light on their own during the investigation. I also think it would have been possible that if she did not take the plea agreement, that she could have gotten even more charges added somewhere along the way due to how she had mistreated her other children throughout the years. Also, in accordance to her plea, she agreed to testify against Jody in her upcoming trial, assuming that Jody doesn't also just make a plea deal. While Ruby had admitted to the horrific physical abuse she subjected her children to, she also states it was Jody who had made her do it and convinced her that her children were possessed and needed to repent. As of scripting this, Jody has not been offered a plea deal by the courts, and some news outlets like Sidebar on Law and Crime speculate that they might not offer her one altogether. It might be likely that due to the other previous clients coming forth to speak against Jody and her practices, especially her need to target and punish those that break away from her, that the courts might try to add charges against her. If she is offered a plea deal, it would be within her best interest to just accept it instead of letting all of this go to trial, since the fact that Ruby has already taken her plea deal and admitted that, like, all of the charges, like what she was charged with, all of the details were the facts of the case, so that can all be used against Jody. Jody's next court date is currently scheduled for December 27th, which is going to be the court date in which she pleads guilty or not guilty to the charges. So we'll find out either closer to that date or during the court date, like altogether, if she's been offered any sort of plea agreement. Additionally, with Ruby's plea agreement, she's scheduled for sentencing on February 20th, so we'll figure out then how long she will be serving prison time for. So now, until Jody's next court date, this is all like the big updates regarding this situation. There's likely been like little small things floating around and other details I could have missed, but I believe that the ones that I went over here are like the big major things that people are really interested in hearing about. I think everyone watching can be in agreement that both of these women really need to be in prison for a long time, and I also think neither of them should ever be around children ever again. I also don't believe that Kevin should be getting custody of these children. I hope that these kids can heal from all of this, but I know that it's going to be understandably very difficult for them to have trust in any sort of mental health professionals now, given that much of this abuse was done by the hands of a therapist. Anyway, be respectful in the comment section, please. Subscribe to this channel for any new updates, and like this video for the engagement, I guess. Check out the description for sources and links to things like Patreon and other socials. Thank you to my patrons, Ippo, Ashley, Alec, and Mel. You guys make making content like this possible. This is Minji signing off. Until next time.
I can't move on till I let go. I feel so lost, never at home. Need to be strong, every breath hold. 'Cause I can't move on till I